My guest today is Juliana Vida, the Chief Technical Advisor for Public Sector at Splunk. Juliana, always great to catch up.
Same with you, Jason.
Let me set just a little bit of context for our discussion today. A common refrain over the last 5 years or so, maybe a little longer, maybe a little shorter, when it comes to cloud computing is that securing applications and data is a shared responsibility. Agencies cannot set it and leave it, so to speak. Now, for agency leaders to understand how best to secure the cloud, they need both the data and a strategy that prioritizes mission-critical systems and information. It's clear that the chief information security officers and other agency security leaders must have the right tools and processes to ensure the transition to cloud services happens quickly, but also safely. Agencies must get the security right because the move to the cloud is not slowing down. Deltek, the market research firm, expects civilian agencies to spend more than $2.1 billion on cloud services this year alone. Deltek found that agencies are using more cloud-based cyber tools, and this includes data encryption, continuous monitoring, multi-layer defenses, and identity and access management among the most popular tools and software services. So, how can agencies successfully and securely move to the cloud? How has the last year really changed the necessity of secure cloud services? Well, once again, that's where my guest comes in. Juliana Vida is the Chief Technical Advisor for Public Sector at Splunk. We know everything that's happened in 2020. We don't need to go through the pandemic and the acceleration in the cloud. But now that agencies have been there, they've maybe take a half a step back and say, okay, what worked, what didn't, what kind of results are they seeing? Is this cloud thing, so to speak, after 10 years popular?
Right. And I'm glad we're at the point where we don't have to rehash everything that, we've learned over the last year. But yes, the cloud thing is popular. Yes, agencies are talking openly about the benefits, that they saw. A lot are talking about the success with remote work and the success with delivering remote services, healthcare, for example. But what people are doing now is they're taking a bit of a step back and saying, okay, did we get it right? Particularly the security aspect, because unfortunately, what we know just from talking to customers and anecdotally is that several agencies, quite a bit of the government, did what they had to do. Like they basically did a lift and shift, we say, from legacy, old, hard to sustain environment to got to move to the cloud, and they did that. But it's like moving into a new house. You leave your old house that you've lived in forever. Let's say you've raised your family there, you collected all this stuff. You know where everything is, sort of, it's up in the garage, and then you move it to a new house and you say, we'll go through all that junk later. And so now is the going all through the junk part. Now is and you know what I mean? I don't mean junk, but now it's the time for the reckoning. It's the time for the application rationalization that perhaps wasn't done. It's the time to realize, wow, the world has changed and the attack surface has grown and is unmanageable. And people are talking about zero trust and can't trust anybody. Ooh, we didn't think about that, when we moved all of our stuff from legacy to cloud. So we're seeing a lot of that, a lot of rethinking of the security frameworks, the security architectures. And I'll tell you, I think that's a good thing that agencies are thinking about that they're not okay with just, let's just leave all the data there and we'll just move on into the future. We're seeing them take the time to be intentional, to talk with their industry partners, to talk with their peers in government. What's working? What didn't work? How can we fix things moving forward? So that is really positive. It's good to see that a lot of the good that has come through this year and still happening through the pandemic, a lot of that good is being turned into even more good. But I would say that this application rationalization and the security piece are probably the two big factors that we see people looking at in terms of, did they make the right kind of investment or the right kind of move into a hybrid cloud environment?
I recently covered Senate Homeland Security Governmental Affairs hearing on cybersecurity. And one of the things that came up time again was, and you mentioned this zero trust, this idea of understanding, move away. It's not just that buzzword of zero trust, and really relook at architectures. So maybe let me start there at the architecture piece. And we don't want to bore people too much, so we won't go into the deep discussion of enterprise architectures and reference architectures and the like. But is that just the network itself that they're starting to look at, how it's configured, or what do you mean architecture? Maybe give me just a little bit of a high level definition.
Sure. So you make a really good point. When I say architecture, I don't mean just the reference architecture. Let's use the word framework. Framework in your mind, framework in your programming, framework in your policy, all of that with respect to security and zero trust is under revision. Just the way we generally used to think of protecting our information as being this castle and moat. If I just build a deeper moat, or I build a stronger wall, hackers won't be able to get in. No, those days are over. And so now it is physical security, perhaps, but there's also security of every user, every person, every device, every wireless access point, every tool that you bring into your environment at the data layer has to be untrusted until you can verify who it is or what it is and whether it needs access to data. So that's when I say architecture, I suppose I used the wrong word because this is for all people, all citizens and workers and people who interact with our public sector, which is all of us, whether we're consuming services or delivering them. We need to be thinking beyond I better change my password from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to something else. That's old. That's the old days. That's kindergarten. The world unfortunately has graduated us up into a place where we need to be thinking about, my wireless provider, are they providing enough security for my access point and the guests that I allow into my network at home? And what about this new gadget that my teenager wants to plug into my USB port? That's what I mean by we all need to be thinking about security, because I think the world has learned by now there are enough bad actors out there looking for that precious data, because it is precious, and precious in terms of they can sell it, they can use it for ransomware, get money from us. There are plenty of bad people out there and bad actors whose capabilities have gone beyond our ability to just manage it like we used to, with tight cyber hygiene principles, for example, or good cyber hygiene in the home. So now we all need to really be thinking about how do we leverage technology to help us keep the bad guys out, keep the bad guys and the bad assets from getting at our data, because it's no longer protected by a wall, firewall or otherwise.
Or at the very least, know that breach is going to happen. So how do you protect your most high value assets and work down? Hey, if they want my first name but nothing else about me, they can have all my first names they want, which kind of leads us down the path of as the complexity of these cloud environments continue, because you're in this hybrid world, and I think agencies will be in the hybrid world for the long term. There's a visibility, there's a control. Why has this been so difficult to achieve?
Yeah, well, it was already difficult to achieve before the pandemic. So think back to when we were talking only about an agency was considering, should we go to cloud or not? Should we make the investments and kind of wean ourselves off of legacy sustainment and move to cloud? Well, I mean, some agencies figured that out a while ago and said, yes, it's time for us to make the investment, and they moved. But now it's even hard. It's become even harder during the pandemic, because it was like the pandemic was a forcing function, and it made agencies and service providers do those things faster. And that was, maybe you were thinking about one cloud or moving to one cloud provider. Well, now there are more cloud providers on the scene. There are different capabilities that you might want to tap into. There are a lot of benefits from a hybrid cloud environment. How about no vendor lock-in? Maybe you're making the decision that we don't want to just go with this company or that vendor because maybe they're not around 5 years from now. So all of those factors have created an even more complex environment of not only do we go to cloud, but which one or ones do we leverage? So that alone is enough complexity. But Jason, we know that the average agency actually has 7.3 different clouds. They're in a multi-cloud management situation. 7.3. Why? Because there's some commercial cloud. There's maybe there's multiple commercial cloud. There's on-prem, technology that they're still using, or government created cloud type of environments. And when you start to stitch all of those together, what becomes very clear, and you use the word, Jason, is the visibility not just within each of those environments, but across those environments. And I don't think this is going to be a shocker to anybody, but every cloud vendor is not really keen on helping you manage your data when you move it into another vendor's cloud environment. Some of them do, I might know one, but many of them do not. And so that makes it even harder. But still, the benefits of cloud far outweigh the risks of just staying on-prem and keeping those legacy technologies just sustained. And I like to use the words, just putting electrical tape around those old wires. Eventually, you're going to run out of electrical tape, or it's going to get really expensive because no one makes it anymore, or you're going to start a fire and you're going to cause some real damage and you're going to have to modernize. So yes, it's complex, but that doesn't mean it's not worth it. It doesn't mean it's not worth the investment.
That's amazing. 7.3 different clouds. I talked with a couple of CIOs recently who brought this up. That fact is that they want to not necessarily reduce the number of clouds, but better manage the clouds that they're in, and maybe look at, okay, do we have software X running on cloud Y and cloud Z, and maybe they could just run on cloud Y, but something else could run on cloud Z. So I think there is that rationalization starting. So how can agencies kind of, and what's the role of the security team in that rationalization effort?
Right. Good. I'm glad you're hearing this from others. I mean, this is just what's happening in the real world, is this management of multi-cloud. For security teams, I think we can't stop talking about the importance of embedding security in with all the other business or mission functions across an agency. We hear the terms all the time. You can't bake security in, or I mean, you can't bolt security in you have to bake it in. Well, that's not just the technology, that's the people. That's bringing security people into conversations about investments or policy or how we're going to upskill the workforce, because security is table stakes. We just cannot, agencies and organizations cannot be talking about mission execution without in the next breath talking about, and who's keeping it secure, and how are we monitoring, and who's going to make sure that there's, if there's a hack tomorrow, then we can quickly isolate that and move on to execute our mission. It's a new world. It's a new way of thinking across the federal government, that the security stuff matters to everyone. And it's unfortunate that often the conversation turns to, well, how much is it going to cost? Well, just like anything that's worth that has any value, it will cost money, but it's, like I said, it's worth the investment. So I'll use the DoD example. Inside the Pentagon, there's conversations all the time about the budgets and who's going to get the money for this program and that program. Everyone knows that military hardware is expensive. An aircraft carrier is expensive. And so people might argue about how much money or how many aircraft carriers, but no one's asking, yeah, but do we really need to make the investment in an aircraft carrier? Is it really a smart investment to build another aircraft carrier? No, people generally don't talk about that because they know it's valuable. So we need to get there with security too, is to stop asking whether it's worth it and to begin asking, how are we going to make sure that it's embedded in everything that we buy or do or build or provide in the public sector? Because if we don't, we're going to continue to have, the oil pipeline hack that happened, or the solar winds, or the name your major headline grabbing incident that happens that has to do with cybersecurity.
Well, the good news is Congress is starting to get that message. I know Congressman Katko, the ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee, talked about making CISA $1 billion agency. I was just the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee is talking about how can we help you more. So there, it seems like people are starting to listen. Well, Julianne, on that note, let's take a quick break. You're listening to the discussion on the road to multi-cloud and hybrid cloud success, managing security and complexity, sponsored by Splunk on Federal News Network.